Hi, my name is James Wiley, and I'm going to take you through a demo of Corvil through the eyes of typical Corvil users. So let's meet them. Firstly, we have the IT operations team. Ollie is responsible for the day-to-day running of all applications, ensuring the lights are always on and shining brightly. Then we have the network operations team. Nick and his team architect and run the network. They're also used to investigating application performance issues even when it's not the network. And then finally, we have Steve in the security operations team. It's Steve's job to quickly react when a cyber threat occurs, to figure out how it got in, isolate the threat, and prevent further damage from occurring. Okay, so let's get started and join Ollie to see how he uses Corvil to manage the delivery of applications. In this example, Ollie and his team have rolled out a new e-commerce application, but they've been suffering with a few teething problems. Users have been complaining about performance, which is resulting in a lower number of payments being processed. So Ollie has turned to Corvil for help. When plugged in, Corvil automatically discovers and starts analyzing every transaction flowing through the network, including the user response time, the network performance, database performance, and a whole host of other things. Now, Ollie has picked a bunch of the metrics he's most interested in and presented them together in a dashboard he's named e-commerce portal. At the top, we can see his tracking logins. He can see successful and unsuccessful logins, as well as the volume of payments. He's also tracking the end user response time and the performance of the database, storage, and payment processing components. As he starts to scroll down, we can see Corvil has automatically discovered all of his front-end web servers and is tracking their individual performance, including a set of network health statistics. This is really powerful because it tells him how the service is performing, but also how it's being delivered to the end users across the network. Below this, we see Corvil has also detected database activity, breaking down the performance by each logical connection to the database in both tabular and time series views. Further down, we see statistics for the back-end storage system and response times for payment processing. Corvil has automatically detected all tiers of the application and is monitoring them in true real time, so Ollie and his team can see all the moving parts working together and in context. And this data is interactive. By hovering over fields, you can see more detail. And then by clicking on a session, you're offered contextual options to drill down for further analysis. Okay, so let's see how Ollie investigates the issue reported by the users. The first thing he turns to is user response time, because this represents the service level the users are actually experiencing. Now, Corvil has broken down the performance by each front-end web server and is tracking every client's request and how long the responses take to go back. Immediately, he sees that one of the servers is delivering a maximum transaction time much higher than the others, with a user response time in excess of 2.5 seconds. And this is exactly what the users are experiencing and complaining about. Ollie now knows the issue is within the data center, and a quick check of the TCP response times and out of sequence confirms that the network connectivity out to the clients is fine. But Ollie spots the database performance is also spiking to a similar height at exactly the same time as the user response time, and this looks suspicious. So Ollie decides to ping Dave, the database expert, to see what he thinks. Ollie sends Dave the screenshot of the Corvil graph to get his opinion. Dave quickly confirms Ollie's suspicion that there's something wrong with the database, and he asks if Corvil can get more detail. So Ollie clicks on the high spike to drill into Corvil's network data analytics, and this is much more powerful than the traditional method of attempting to decipher a packet capture offline. Corvil does all the hard work for you. Ollie is presented with the entire context of the spike he saw on the live dashboard, and he can now see a single transaction with a total transaction time over 2 seconds. He also sees that in general, the database responsiveness is okay, but there are in fact tons of queries making up the entire transaction, and this is resulting in the slow overall response time. And this is exactly the information that Dave needs to figure out what is going on. So Ollie exports all the database messages in a CSV and sends them across to Dave. Later that day, Dave comes back and asks if he can get proactive notifications from Corvil if high database transactions occur in the future. So Ollie clicks over into Corvil Streams, where every HTTP request and database query is tracked and could be streamed in real time to other platforms. Now he knows Dave is using Splunk, so rather than send every message that could blow his license, Ollie is able to filter for just the slow transaction events Dave is interested in. Once set up, Corvil streams these events to Dave's Splunk dashboard via the Corvil app that's downloadable from Splunkbase. Furthermore, Dave can click back on those events directly to Corvil to carry out a full detailed investigation, because Corvil's also stored every message in the full context of all other applications on the network. So with Corvil, IT operations teams can see and manage their applications proactively and in real time. Identifying and resolving issues becomes easy because teams are able to collaborate and can trace transactions through every tier of the infrastructure. Now, we just saw how Ollie used Corvil to investigate application behavior. But in today's digital businesses, all applications are delivered across the network. And so the network operations team are often the first port of call when things go wrong. Let's meet Nick and see how his team use Corvil to make their life easier. Nick's team are responsible for running and maintaining the global corporate network, data centers, and global points of presence in Europe, the US, and Asia. In this scenario, the applications team have contacted Nick because the bounce rate for an interactive online service has jumped significantly in London. They checked out the application and everything appears to be okay, and no other sites are affected, so they're blaming the network. In Nick's Corvil dashboard, he can see an interactive view of network performance across all regions. At a glance, he can see traffic volumes, latency, and packet loss for each region, with more detail broken down by individual links below. One thing stands out immediately. There's packet loss in Europe. The other regions are running clean. To investigate further, he compares the European links in the table below. Corvil is tracking the end-to-end loss and latency for every packet, and he sees that the loss is only occurring on the London to Dublin link, consistent with the problem the application team reported. Nick clicks to investigate and selects link utilization. He wants to check if the packet loss is caused by congestion. Immediately, Nick can see the top applications using the link, and it's quite clearly dominated by web traffic. He then scrolls down to take a look at the utilization. Now, Nick knows this is a 200 meg link, but the utilization graph is only peaking at around 40 meg. So it would appear that everything looks fine. Then why is there so much packet loss? Well, this is exactly the kind of information you would expect to see with traditional monitoring tools such as NetFlow, top-end tables of activity, and average utilization graphs. But Nick scrolls down a little further to see Corvil's Microburst Graph, and here we see a very different story. Because Corvil is seeing every packet, it is able to see and report short-lived bursts of traffic. Now, these microbursts are invisible to traditional monitoring tools because they get averaged out over several seconds or minutes, but they're often the root cause of network congestion, packet loss, and application performance issues. Now, Nick can click on a burst to drill in for a closer look. And as he zooms into the burst, the top applications table updates to reveal the culprit: server synchronization traffic. Bursts of traffic are being put onto the network that only last around 50 milliseconds, but they're so large they exceed link capacity, driving congestion and causing the packet loss. Speaking to the application team, it turns out that this process should occur out of hours, but something changed during an upgrade at the weekend, and it's now happening frequently during business hours. But it's a very easy thing for them to fix, which they'll schedule right away. Nick is having a busy day. He's next asked to investigate an issue with a web-based service that's delivered out of the main data center. It's apparently affecting users in New York. Corvil is monitoring all of the web sessions at the front door of the data center, so Nick is able to see the response time of the service as it's delivered out to the users. This information is broken down for him by a web server, and he can see details for each one, including the volume of requests, errors, and performance. Now, Nick is happy the service is performing okay within the data center, so he focuses upon the external connectivity. Corvil is also measuring the round-trip time out to the users by passively monitoring their TCP flows and the exchange of data between client and server. This is performed completely passively from the data center and is a powerful measurement of network performance. The plot on the right-hand side is updating in real time, and in this case, showing the access time for the US East region jumping up to over 300 milliseconds and then dropping back down to around 50. This doesn't look right, so Nick decides to check out the network services that are supporting the region. Corvil has automatically detected these network protocols, and they include critical functions like DNS, routing, LDAP, DHCP, and so on. At the very top of the screen, Nick can see any important error conditions, and there are a ton of BGP withdrawn routes. He can also see that it's only happening with one BGP peer, the primary connection to the service provider from the data center. So he decides to take a look at a live stream of route update activity. He now fully understands what's going on. The primary route is flapping. The route to the same AS number and name is continuously being withdrawn and then added back. The client connections will be flipping back and forth between the primary and the geographically diverse secondary path. This totally explains the jumping client round-trip latency he saw, going from 50 milliseconds up to 300 and then back again. After speaking to the service provider and getting them to investigate the route flap, Nick sets Corvil to forward the live routing stream as a syslog to their network operations center, so any future issues will be seen on the main NOC screens and acted upon immediately. Because Corvil inspects every packet flowing through the network, it is ideally placed to detect security threats in real time and forward them to the SIM in the Security Operations Center. So finally, let's meet Steve, a security analyst who's responsible for detecting and investigating cyber attacks. He is particularly worried about attackers who evade his regular security controls, cover their tracks, and exfiltrate the company's high-value assets. In the past, Steve has invested in but struggled to operationalize threat intelligence. So Steve has now set up Corvil to detect attack indicators using iSight Partners Threat Intelligence and send any threat events directly to his SIM, which in this case is Splunk. So let's see how Steve uses Corvil to investigate and track suspect user activity. We'll start in the SIM because that's where Steve sees the attack indicators received from Corvil. And he sees a number of events that have occurred, and there's quite a bit of detail that's been sent by Corvil. Normally, it would be challenging for Steve to see what else that attacker may have been doing within his environment. But now with Corvil, Steve can click right through to see what else may be going on with the compromised host. Steve starts his investigation in the Suspicious Communications dashboard, where he can see the results from Corvil's real-time analysis, picking up anomalies, deviations from baseline norms, and also any attack indicators from the integrated threat intelligence. It's clear that certain hosts have been compromised, so Steve would like to understand which user accounts may have been hijacked and what those user accounts did next. So he switches across to look at user activity. Corvil enables Steve to track user authentication and access activity and spot attackers seeking to gain a foothold. But it also helps him to track the activity of privileged user accounts, such as domain administrators. Steve can click through to look at account activity in more detail, and it's pretty clear there is an attacker active in the environment attempting to access accounts from the same IP address. Steve is now concerned that the attacker may have obtained some data and is attempting to exfiltrate the data out. So he searches for any suspicious communications from the same IP address and immediately sees DNS tunneling activity to suspect servers in Russia. His team can now move quickly to shut down that compromised host. But the last thing he wants to investigate is how the host got compromised in the first place. And spear phishing is still one of the most common means of infection, so he takes a look at what emails the original account received recently. And he sees there's a suspect email with a PDF attachment which could well be a spear phish. By carrying out another search with the email subject, Steve is able to check if anyone else has received the same email. Looks like Gary Belson, the CFO, also did, so Steve calls him straight away to warn him. With Corvil, security teams get broad real-time views of activity across the network, including granular drill down and the ability to search important forensic details retrospectively. Corvil also integrates easily with existing security infrastructure and feeds event data to SIEMs, providing immediate value once deployed. At last, Steve has been able to effectively operationalize his threat intelligence and has the ability to react effectively and far quicker when an attack occurs. Thank you for taking the time to learn how Corvil can help your operations teams run and secure your business in the now.